by Mansell, who was just waiting for his moment. And he did it at Ascari on lap 34. Just like Patrese, but no spin this time. Senna decided that now it was time for a tyre stop. It was a good one, less than 6 seconds. And though it dropped him to 5th place, his fresh rubber helped him past Schumacher for 4th. Then past his teammate Berger for 3rd. And finally Alain Prost for 2nd. But for Nigel Mansell, this was perhaps the sweetest victory of the year. Ayrton Senna and McLaren Honda beaten fair and square in a straight fight. And that championship was still just alive, with 4 races to go.
A great boost for Mansell as he entered the last quarter of the season. Piquet finishing behind his new Benetton teammate, points for Prost and Berger. But a vital win for Mansell. Afterwards he knew he'd been in a race.
I think it was a fabulous race to watch. It was a fabulous race to be in. It was a great fight at the beginning between Ayrton, myself and Ricciardo. I wasn't sure whether Ricciardo was my teammate at one time or not, because he was pushing me very hard when I was right behind Ayrton. Then I decided to let Ricciardo go because I wanted him to duck and dive with Ayrton to use his tyres up. So I dropped back then just to conserve my tyres and my own airflow, which worked real good. And then I woke up a little bit when Ricciardo got past. I thought, okay, fine, I better go for it now. And then Ricciardo immediately obviously had a gearbox problem, which made him spin. And then it was between Ayrton and myself again. And then I think Ayrton ran into a little bit of a tyre problem, and I managed to squeeze by just before he went into the pits. And then it was a very hard race at the end because I'd blistered, I think, all my tyres by this time.
A win and 10 points for Nigel Mansell. 18 points now the difference between him and Senna at the top of the championship. Senna picking up those important 6 points for 2nd place.
Sure, better second than nothing. I think it was a tough race, and I was not as quick as the 2 Williams, and I was struggling. I was struggling with them. They were pushing me. They were pushing me at the beginning, and it was difficult. But then Ricciardo got by, managed to get by. Then he had a problem. And Nigel was right there, and he managed to get by the same place again. And from there on, I couldn't follow Nigel. I knew I had some tyre problem anyway, so I decided to stop. And it paid off, because otherwise I would have fall back a lot, and I wouldn't even have finished second. So it was a second place, very good.
In the Constructors' Championship, it seemed that McLaren and Williams were destined to dispute the title right to the bitter end. No chance of intervention from the rest, with Ferrari in particular smarting about that. Round 12, Portugal, a fairly recent but very popular addition to the Grand Prix calendar. The initial Formula One race at Estoril in 1983 decided the championship then, and it would surely play an important role 8 years later. Nigel Mansell in relaxed mood with his wife, Roseanne. In Friday qualifying, it was Gerhard Berger in prime form, a stunningly quick time that only Ayrton Senna could approach. On the Saturday, Riccardo Patrese, having claimed 3rd position on the grid from Nigel Mansell, found no response from his car soon after finishing his flying lap. Lip readers might like to report the comments to Mr. F. Williams of Didcot. Nigel Mansell stole 2nd behind Gerhard Berger with an expert display on a track he enjoys. But Ayrton Senna goes well here too, and he made it an all-McLaren front row. With McLaren 1 and 2, Riccardo Patrese had different ideas. In the closing moments, in a car set up for Nigel Mansell, he rocketed round a smidgen over 1 minute 13 seconds, and that was good enough to claim pole position. So Patrese and Berger on the front row, with the championship contenders immediately behind.
But I mean, for you guys, it couldn't have worked out better. I mean, shit. I mean, geez, for you guys, you got the best grid possible, you know? I mean, for me, it's the worst grid possible.
Sunday morning at Estoril, and Ferrari in trouble again. An oversight by their mechanics resulted in Prost beating a hasty exit from a car that took warm-up too literally, and so forcing him to use the spare car in the race.
There he is in the spare Ferrari, waiting for the green light, and this time Patrese's start was perfect. Nigel Mansell chopped in front of Senna. Senna went right, but Mansell went round him at the first corner. And then he went inside Berger to be second. Alesi tried to do the same to Senna, but it didn't work. Prost was once more content to follow the excitement at this stage. Mansell followed Patrese until lap 18 and then went smoothly ahead. Senna at this stage was down in 4th place. It all looked to be in the bag. Here's Ayrton Senna's tyre stop, a record 5 seconds stationary. Off he goes, a perfect stop. But here comes Nigel Mansell, and this was the stop that virtually spelt the end of his championship hopes. Watch the right rear wheel. He stops at the spot. All 4 wheels are off. The new ones are on. And in less than 8 seconds he's away, but the right rear flies off, scattering other mechanics. And the 3-wheeled Williams stops in the pit lane. Ansel is stranded. He can do absolutely nothing. In slow motion, one of the mechanics on the right rear raises his arm, but his fellow hasn't tightened the nut, and the car starts to leave. Now in the pit lane, another wheel is manhandled on. All sorts of regulations are being broken. The car is lifted bodily. They manage to get the wheel on, but the seconds are ticking away, and Mansell is almost weeping with frustration. Still, it's not finished. Other cars go by, and finally the job is done. Mansell storms away, leaving 2 black rubber lines down the pit lane. He's now in 17th place. Berger, second, retires in the pits. Alain Prost, third, has another engine failure. And Jean Alesi, now third, is under pressure from Martini and Capelli. This was when they came up to lap Martin Brundle. Watch for Alesi's hand signals before he goes by. And he was able to take Martini with him. Then, inevitably, the black flag for Mansell. In 16 laps, he'd gone from 17th to 6th. An incredible drive. But that pit stop had broken all the rules, and an inconsolable Mansell had nothing to say. In the closing stages, Piquet, a lap down in the Benetton, followed the cruising Patrese home. But poor Capelli lost 5th place when he clouted the barrier in the Leighton House. So Piquet and Schumacher in the Benettons moved up to 5th and 6th places. So a Williams win, richly deserved by Patrese, but for all Nigel Mansell's fans, it was the wrong Williams after yet another cruel wrench of fate for the Englishman.
Williams managing to salvage something from the race, and so keeping their constructors' title hopes alive. Patrese, though, was certainly conscious that attention would be centred on Mansell's misfortune rather than his win.
But I have to say that I deserve this race because it's all year that I'm trying very hard, and probably I could still on the championship fight if I didn't have some bad luck. So at least before the end of the season, I think that I really wanted a victory. I tried all my best since yesterday when I got the pole. So I think that, okay, a bit disappointing for Nigel, but very happy for me.
Senna celebrated with an element of relief, while Mansell was down but not out yet. 24 points the difference, 3 races left. The first at the brand new circuit Catalunya near Barcelona, one of the sporting capitals of the world, the Olympic host in 1992. Almost 3 miles round, the new venue for the Spanish Grand Prix. Gabriele Tarquini decided to move camp from AGS to Fondmetal.
But I changed the team because AGS have the problem to finish the season, and I take the decision to change the team because the Fondmetal was happy to take me, and I finished the season now.
And Olivier Gruillard replaced Tarquini at AGS. Alessandro Zanardi, another Formula 3000 find, stepped into Jordan's number 32 at the expense of Roberto Moreno. The 4th driver of the car this year, a great chance for the 24-year-old Italian.
It's very difficult because everything is new for me here at Barcelona, the track, the car. I never tested the Jordan car before, but you know, it's very difficult, but I think I have more chance in my Formula 3000 championship on the last race.
Any football manager looking for strikers for the next World Cup might take a look at Nigel Mansell. Well, he should be living in the States by then. 2 goals in this friendly involving drivers and media raised an eyebrow or two. But whether he will play football again is another matter. An ankle injury actually cast doubt on his participation in the forthcoming Grand Prix. Luckily, it was his left ankle, and there's no clutch pedal on the Williams.
No, I'm not a good footballer. I just like running around. If you run quick enough, it looks like you're working, but I'm not really.
But there was no doubt at all about the pain he was in from the injured ankle. Quite what his team manager, Frank Williams, had to say about his escapade has gone unrecorded. And so on to qualifying. Ayrton Senna, knowing that he only had to finish ahead of Nigel Mansell in the race to claim his 3rd world title, set a time that was good enough for 3rd place on the grid. Nigel Mansell, still resting that injured left leg, took 2nd on the grid for a race that he had to win to preserve his title chances. And it was Gerhard Berger, rediscovering some excellent qualifying form towards the end of the season, who scurried through the heat haze on the start and finish line to claim the pole. On Sunday morning, rain produced a damp circuit, the extra joker in the pack for a crucial race.
At the start, the rain had stopped, but it was still wet, and the 2 McLarens moved smoothly ahead at the green light, with Mansell and Schumacher next. Into the first corner, Senna tried to pass his teammate and then thought better of it. Mansell, meanwhile, was all over Senna. It was tremendously slippery, and it was quite a miracle that all the field got through the first corners intact. Schumacher was watching all this from 4th place, and then he decided to dive inside Nigel Mansell for 3rd. While there was excitement at the front, Thierry Boutsen was already off further down on the greasy surface after a tangle with Eric Bernard, and Jean Alesi was attacking Mansell. Schumacher went for Senna. You can see how slippery it is. And then he was himself threatened by Mansell. Berger was getting away at this point, as Mansell disposed of Schumacher again, round the outside, and went after Senna. It was great motor racing on the slippery surface. Meanwhile, Alain Prost, who'd wanted to start on slicks but had been prevented by his team, came in early as a gamble that the track would dry out, and he stormed back into the race, now down in 19th place. Mansell wound in Senna and got alongside for second place. Two determined men with the championship uppermost in their minds. Watch how close they get. A real battle of nerves. Mansell has won the corner, but Senna fights back. Leader Berger came in for slicks, for the track was now almost dry, but removing tape from his brake ducts lost more time before he rejoined in 5th place. And then Mansell and Senna, first and second, came in on the same lap. The Williams team, with the memory of Portugal uppermost in their minds, were slower than the McLaren boys. Senna was out first, and he'd regained the lead in the pit lane. Out went Mansell. The McLaren strategy was to use Berger as the hare. Watch Senna wave him by. Come on, Gerhard. And so Berger, perhaps a little unwillingly, goes into the lead. Schumacher, who'd stopped early, was 4th behind Mansell. And as Nigel closed on Senna on the still damp track, there was a brief further shower of rain. And now we saw something unusual. Ayrton Senna, out of control, backwards off the circuit. Mansell has squeezed through, Schumacher too. Senna rejoins in 7th place. Mansell was on superb form again. Berger was still leading, but watch how Mansell just asserts himself up the inside of a right-hander. And Berger only just stays in control. Now Schumacher was after Berger, but this squirt up alongside the McLaren ends in a spin. Nothing daunted, the German rejoined in 6th place after a bit of autocrossing. Next, Alesi was brought in by the organisers and held at the top of the pit lane for 10 seconds, a punishment for weaving at the start. It dropped him from 5th place to 9th, and it put real fire back into his driving for the rest of the race. Just look at the speed he went down the pit lane. And then Berger was in to post his 7th retirement of the season with engine trouble. And Alesi, still fuming from his penalty, was catching Senna for 4th place, slicing by decisively. Martini did the last lap on 3 wheels. Morbidelli and Zanardi had gone off together, just as Morbidelli's teammate Martini came innocently along. And look what happened next. Not quite what you normally mean by team tactics. So a fine win for Mansell, a poor 5th for Senna. And mathematically at least, the championship wasn't quite over yet.
The result for Mansell. Schumacher scored another point. The Ferraris were happier at Barcelona than usual. But the talking points, the brilliant Williams recovery after Estoril, and Mansell's superb drive.
It wasn't so nice from where I was. No, it was reasonably clean, and but I think everybody saw that it was a very, very big fight, and Ayrton was giving no quarter, and Gerhard was giving no quarter, and there wasn't much room on a number of occasions, but a great race for everybody, and a good race for me. I'm very happy.
There was much to impose on those 2 overtaking maneuvers, and I don't really understand why Mansell is doing what he's doing. But I was able to avoid any contact when he was trying to overtake me, and just as I did in Portugal. And I will do my best in the last 2 races as long as I can to avoid that. But of course, I am also fighting for the championship, and I have to get a little bit tougher instead of opening the road every time that somebody comes playing everything over me. So we wait and see.
Heading for Japan, Mansell knew he had to win the last two races to keep his title hopes alive. Suzuka in the rain, and a welcome return to the Grand Prix scene for Bertrand Gachot. Out of jail, but not as yet into a car.
Well, my job is to drive Formula Ones. I think before what happened, we were driving good. I just had done the lap record in Hungary and everything was going well. I was 11th in the World Championship. So I believe it was very unfair to put me in jail, and certainly it was unjustified. So I hope that I can get to my place and better it.
Despite the rain before the first day of qualifying, Nigel Mansell remained in good humour.
And then, I mean, welcome to sunny Japan. I mean, it's great, isn't it? Come here for your suntan. Gee, it was a nice, easy weekend. Plenty of relaxation, no football, no boxing. I'm not going to be a triathlon this weekend. I'm just going to drive cars nice and quiet.
In at Leighton House, another recruit from the World Sports Car Championship, the Mercedes driver Karl Wendlinger from Austria. He replaced Ivan Capelli, who played team manager for the weekend. The new president of the sports governing body, FISA, arrived at Suzuka. Max Mosley, who'd been voted in instead of Jean-Marie Balestre, here chatting with Ayrton Senna and Ron Dennis. Afterwards, he outlined FISA's aims.
Well, I think the main thing is to make sure this is a top-level professional sport. We're talking about Formula One. And really the main function of FISA is to do everything from its side to match that level of professionalism. I think we've got to make sure that the entire FISA operation, which is really a refereeing operation, is at the same high professional standard that the teams operate to. Having said that, that's Formula One. The main work, for me at least, and the FISA generally, is outside Formula One and in the lesser formulae and with the countries where there is relatively little motorsport. Our job is to try and build motorsport up in those countries all over the world.
Upsets in practice at Suzuka. Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi Ferrari. His accident delayed the session. No sooner was it underway again than Gabriele Tarquini made a mess of his new Fond Metal. More seriously, Eric Bernard in the Larousse, still in the cockpit of his crashed car. There's some indication of the impact from the replay here. Amazing that the driver didn't suffer major injuries. Bernard with a broken leg that will keep him out of Formula One until next year. Helicoptered to hospital, Larousse ran just one car at Suzuka. Jean Alesi out in the Ferrari, finding Suzuka troublesome, the car out of shape in more ways than one. 1991 just wasn't Alesi's or Ferrari's year. Michael Schumacher, another young charger, walking back after his skirmish in the Benetton. Made a great impression in the first few races, Schumacher, but he demonstrated that nobody's infallible in this game. Nigel Mansell, all he had to do was win. Ayrton Senna, all he had to do was finish ahead of Mansell. It was Mansell, third on the grid eventually, 300ths of a second slower than Ayrton Senna. Senna content with a front row position, especially as Mansell was behind him. He had a chance to control the race. He could send the pole position man Gerhard Berger away as the hare at the start. Mansell was determined. After last year, no quarter to be given at the first corner.
I mean, I had the perfect line of sight of what happened last year between Ayrton and Allen at the first corner, and as you know, I drove for Ferrari then, and I'm not going to certainly give him the opportunity to do the same sort of thing for me.
If I finish second place tomorrow, the championship will be over. If Mansell does not win, then it's almost certain that the championship will be over as well. So it's an open situation, but it's being slowly coming to our way, the championship, particularly the second half of the season. bit by bit, step by step, and let's hope that tomorrow is the last bit that we are missing for it.
Race day fortunately dawned fine. All around Suzuka, the race fans displayed their respective loyalties. Many of them backed Nigel Mansell. But Ayrton Senna was not without his supporters.
With two McLarens on the front row, Mansell was down in third spot on the grid. And at the start, the team tactics between Senna and Berger became clear. Berger led down to the first corner. Two McLarens, two Williamses, two Ferraris. And no repeat of last year's collision. But poor Jean Alesi's race didn't last the first lap. Another blown Ferrari engine. More disappointment for Maranello. So while Berger led, Senna concentrated on keeping Mansell down in third place. This four-car shunt started with a spin by De Cesaris, and it also took out Leto, Pirot and Wendlinger. And now Mansell was going for it, getting very close to Senna. He was doing all he could to keep the pressure on. Down the start-finish straight they came, and leaving his braking very late for turn 1 on lap 10, Mansell ran wide. It was all over. He kept his engine running, but the car was bogged down, and you could read the resignation in his shoulders as he climbed out. His championship battle was finished, and in the Williams pit, Patrick Head gave Frank the news. And here in slow motion is how it looked from Nigel's cockpit. It was another bumpy ride into oblivion, but Nigel was magnanimous in defeat.
Basically, I went in deep. I was starting to feel my way with it, and I wasn't in real hurry. But in the warm-up this morning, I had a slight problem with the brake pedal, and I think it was a combination of just going into my deep braking point, and when I hit the pedal, I'm afraid the pedal was a little soft, and I didn't retard, I didn't slow down, which you could probably see on television. The car didn't slow down, and then I ran out of road then. It's as simple as that. I mean, we've given it a great go. The team's done a fabulous job. I'd like to congratulate Ayrton now on his third World Championship. Yeah, there's always next year, and we'll go to Australia and enjoy Australia.
All that was left now was for McLaren on Honda's home soil to stage a crushing 1-2. Berger waved the re-crowned champion into the lead. But behind this demonstration there was still some motor racing going on. There was a good battle for fifth between Martini, Schumacher and Brundle. But that three-car battle became a two-car fight, promoting Brundle to sixth place, when the Benetton slowed to a halt. It had a blown engine. Then Martini stopped with electrical trouble. So, to the delight of Yamaha, Martin Brundle was up to fifth place. It was a reminder that Honda aren't the only Japanese Grand Prix engine manufacturer. The final lap, and after a word from McLaren boss Ron Dennis over the radio, Senna pulled aside to let teammate Gerhard Berger take the race. Senna, of course, knowing that the championship title was already his since Mansell's retirement. So joy for Berger, not his first Japanese Grand Prix victory, but his first ever win for McLaren. And he says thank you to Senna. And from Ron Dennis come congratulations by radio to Ayrton Senna on his third World Championship title.
The McLaren 1-2 sealed the driver's title for Ayrton Senna. Patrese, with third, ensured that the Constructors' Championship lived on until Adelaide. Brundle earned points, so ensuring that Brabham wouldn't have to pre-qualify next year. In Parc Fermé, Mansell sportingly congratulated the new champion. Once again, the title had been decided in Japan. But in contrast to the two previous years, it seemed that motor racing had been the overall winner.
It's been exciting one for me. I won here in '88, was memorable too. '89 I was robbed badly by the system, and that I will never forget. But 1990 it went the other way. It was a sad championship in 1990, but it was a result of the '89 championship and a result of the politics that we had in 1990 and '89. Then '91, fortunately, we were able to have a clean championship without politicians, without people playing any game. It was a technical and a sportive championship that we had this year, and I hope it will be an example not only for myself but for everyone that's competing in Formula One now and in the coming future.
So it's Ayrton Senna, the world champion, his teammate Gerhard Berger, the race winner.
I have to say thank you to Ayrton. We switch over place, and I think it's very nice to know, because a lot of times I was in a situation where I had to take care, or where I was in the difficult part of the game, and it's very nice to know that if it's the other way around, it comes also from the teammate, so it will be no problem at all for the future. If you know both sides are working the same, then I think it will be good for the next year too.
Coming off the podium, surprise, surprise, Ron Dennis getting his own back for a season of soakings. Good to see a title battle that ended with smiles. The last race of the season in Adelaide, South Australia, home of the Australian Grand Prix since 1985. A street circuit with incredibly fast sections that give it the character of a purpose-built track. Ferrari had decided to terminate Alain Prost's contract because of his repeated open criticism of the team's performance. A sad way to finish a relationship between two of the sport's big names, though it had never been comfortable.
We are upset because we've lost as Ferrari one of the best driver and the best test driver of the Formula One. The reason was the behavior of Alain Prost was not at the level that Ferrari would like for his top driver.
It was a move that shocked the Adelaide public. They'd been looking forward to welcoming back the twice winner of their Grand Prix. Ferrari called in their test driver Gianni Morbidelli to take Prost's place. Morbidelli had spent the season driving for the Minardi team. The gap left there was filled by the Brazilian Roberto Moreno. Minardi his third different team of the season after Benetton and Jordan. Another popular driver made a return. Bertrand Gachot took over from the injured Eric Bernard at La Rousse. Bernard, fully recovered, should be back next season. The pressure was supposed to be off. It was the last race of the season, but it was an incident-filled practice. Tarquini crashed the Fondmetal just as he did in Japan. Alessandro Zanardi, over exuberance in the Jordan. Explain that to your team manager. Carl Wendlinger in the Leighton House, the young Austrian, finding the Adelaide circuit quite demanding. Nigel Mansell enjoys the Adelaide circuit, but he didn't like this much. And Gianni Morbidelli tested the Ferrari's resilience. A nasty accident for Aguri Suzuki in the La Rousse. The end of a long, hard season where he hasn't finished a race in the last 14. Out of the cockpit and okay to resume. The Dallara of JJ Lehto in trouble. Michael Schumacher in the Benetton attempting to go over the top of Mark Blundell's Brabham. By contrast, a graceful spin from Riccardo Patrese in the Williams. Stefano Modena in the Tyrrell. The car a mess, the driver fortunately okay. Seemingly untroubled, the new world champion came through to claim his 60th pole position. The record goes higher.
It's very tough, you know, because Gerhard is driving very well, the cars are similar, Williams is also in a similar level, so it's very difficult to maintain the level required to beat everybody else.
Every November, Adelaide comes alive for the Grand Prix. The normally sleepy city turns itself into one huge party, everyone with a part to play. Half an hour before the race, a rainstorm blew in, triggering memories of the controversial Grand Prix of '89.
By the time the grid formed up, the rain was torrential. There'd been a lot of talk about whether the race should run. But the crowd were waiting, the TV stations were waiting, so with the Constructors' Championship still open, the race got underway. 15,000 horsepower scrabbling for grip, and they were off, with Senna and Berger leading the field as expected. But Mansell and the Benettons were up there too, with Alesi, Patrese and Morbidelli following. Quite a Ferrari baptism for Gianni Morbidelli. Conditions were impossible, visibility non-existent, but somehow Mansell got past Berger into second place and started to catch Senna. Piquet showed there was no grip at all, but this little pirouette didn't even lose him fourth place. The ever-determined Mansell was soon on Senna's tail, but as he dived out of the spray to go alongside, a marshal's warning wave told of wreckage ahead. Larini and Alesi had crashed on the straight, and Mansell only just saw the wreckage of the Lamborghini in time and pulled in behind Senna again. Still, in these impossible conditions, Mansell kept the pressure up. No grip on the straight sent Martinez Minardi straight into the wall. And now the rain was coming down harder than ever, and everyone was wondering why the race hadn't been stopped. There's Mansell out of control in the spray behind Senna and backwards into the barriers. As Senna went on alone, Mansell's car was in the wall, with Nigel still in the cockpit. Berger, now second, had a major spin, but rejoined. But now Senna had had enough. He was waving frantically for the race to be stopped. And at last, out came the red flag. But Berger, walking home, had had another huge spin, and how he didn't hit anyone this time is a mystery. Mansell was being helped into a medical van in pain from an injured foot. Afterwards, he was very angry that the race hadn't been stopped earlier.
Everything was okay other than it was a complete joke. I mean, there was debris all over the place, and I don't know whether I got a puncture or whether I ran over something, but the car just instantly went out of control. It might aquaplane, but you know, I've been through the corner in Senna's tracks time and time again. Television will show, and he just threw me straight into the wall, left hand, and he was a big hit. Well, I'm speechless because, you know, there's a truck down the straight, there's 4 cars down the straight. The race should have, they had 10 laps to stop the race when that accident happened. There's debris all over the place. I mean, people getting punctures. I mean, I just don't know, and I mean, I've hurt myself. I mean, my foot is really bad now, and I've got a headache like there's no tomorrow, so I probably had a little bit of concussion. But, I mean, I can't say anymore. I just don't understand.
I think it doesn't really matter whether they start or don't start the race. We've won the Constructors' Championship because Williams needed to win. But I think we did a reasonable job this year. We were leading this race as well. And you win and lose World Championships in 16 races, not one. It would have just been nice to have a better show at the end.
And after a pause to see if the weather would relent, the race was finally abandoned for good.
Half points for the curtailed Grand Prix, but another win for Ayrton Senna. Nigel Mansell appropriately second. Nelson Piquet in his last Benetton race in the points. And a good start for Morbidelli at Ferrari. The absentee on the podium, Nigel Mansell. After a medical check, he went straight to the airport. Adelaide, an anticlimax for everyone, including Senna.
Well, I don't think that was a race, first of all, because it was just a matter of staying on the circuit, and was not a point to try to go quick at all, and it was impossible. We had a race, very bad one here a couple of years ago, and then was impossible, and today was even worse. There was even more water on the back straight, and you could see that all cars were flying away, flying off, hitting the wall, and surely if I was in the lead I had a little more visibility and I could take my time to make sure I would stay on the circuit, but it was just one of those things. I managed to stay on the circuit, but it wasn't a race at all.
Despite the damp ending in Adelaide, it was a season that portrayed so much of the very best of the sport. Ayrton Senna's third world title ensures that he'll be ranked among the all-time greats. Nigel Mansell's latest disappointment in his quest for the championship cannot disguise the fact that he's a genuine racing driver, a supreme entertainer for Formula One's millions of fans.
And no sooner had the teams returned from Adelaide than they began testing and developing, looking ahead to the 1992 season. Formula One never rests.